Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sports Today. Amidst all of the action that's been going on, of course, we've been focusing on the Asia Cup, Formula One, everything else in between. Well, there's also been plenty of football action that has been doing the rounds. In terms of there's been a lot of Premier League matches. In fact, a lot of the big teams are, have in fact played today, and all of them have registered wins. That's a very interesting thing. Normally, in the Premier League, because it's so competitive, you don't really know if you're a supporter of one of the bigger clubs, whether or not they're going to actually be getting or registering a win on that particular day, simply because, well, the league is so competitive, it's not always possible that you're winning every single week. Yet, this was one of those rare weeks where actually all of the bigger clubs ended up registering wins, albeit in very contrasting circumstances, and that's exactly what we're going to go over on this particular video. So the day started with, of course, Manchester United traveling to Southampton. Now, that was obviously a match which a lot of people had a keen interest in, not just because they're United fans, but because, of course, remember, United had started the season poorly, but last week had registered a win against Liverpool. Most people were curious to see if they could continue that form against Southampton, and they could, albeit in much different circumstances. They had to fight very, very hard for, that win. They ended up winning 1-0, courtesy of a Bruno Fernandes. A nice little finish from Fernandes in the second half. And of course, it means that they've now gone two straight games, having won, having already started their, campaign with two losses. They've now turned that around, two wins. So good for them in that sense, obviously. But they weren't the only of those teams, of course, as I said, who would in fact end up getting, one of those big wins, because in the 3 o'clock kickoff UK time, so that's around 7:30 in India time, you had three matches, all of which were of major interest for fans, because you had Chelsea taking on Leicester City, you had Liverpool taking on Bournemouth, and you had Manchester City taking on Crystal Palace. Again, Chelsea registered a 2-1 win over Leicester, which, I mean, that looks like a close win, but it was even closer considering the fact that for Chelsea, Conor Gallagher ended up getting sent off. So Chelsea played most of the match for 10 men. They were 0-0 at halftime. Raheem Sterling scored a brace in the second half. They were 2-0 up, but a Harvey Barnes goal ended up halving that deficit. Yet Chelsea ended up clinging on, and again, the win was doubly important for them, not only because they had been thrashed by Leeds last week, but because they had no Thomas Tuchel on the touchline. He had ended up copying, remember, a one-match ban for the for the fight that he ended up having with Antonio Conte, when Chelsea had played Spurs. So there was no Tuchel at the sidelines. Chelsea still managed to do well, grind out a good result despite being down to 10 men. For Leicester, the poor start to the season carries on. Meanwhile, Liverpool, by the way, finally they've sparked their campaign back into life, and it was a Roberto Firmino masterclass that ended up giving them a 9-0 win. You heard that right, 9-0 win over Bournemouth. Now, Firmino scored two of those goals and he assisted three more of them. But this win really was all about Liverpool reminding people that they are in fact a force to be reckoned with in England. A lot of people had been writing them off after what was an admittedly very poor start in the early parts of the season. Remember, they'd drawn two matches, then ended up losing to Manchester United. So obviously that's not a good look for them, considering they're supposed to be the team that would be closest to challenging Manchester City for the title. But Liverpool have shown that they are in fact still very much a force to be reckoned with, that slow start was just there, was a blip. And that's the thing with Liverpool, when they get momentum on their side, they're very, very hard to stop. You'll remember even last season, at one point they had, amassed a very long unbeaten record, especially at home. So they are very much a force to be reckoned with. They proved that, not that there were too many people doubting it, but it was always a case of them of when they would be able to kick into gear and not if they would be able to kick into gear. And that's exactly what we saw against Bournemouth. You really have to feel sorry for Scott Parker's side. I don't think they did too much wrong. It's just that Liverpool were really in a different class on the given day. And of course, speaking of different classes, Manchester City, my God, we finally see Erling Haaland score his first hat-trick, and it's only his fourth league. It's only the fourth game that he's played for City in the league. So I mean, a lot of people were wondering, Haaland, will he be able to adjust to the intensity of the Premier League? Will he be able to score as many goals as he has in, first in Norway, then Austria, and then afterwards, of course, in Germany? The answer so far is a resounding yes. He's gotten on the score sheet, and today he ended up notching his first Premier League Hat trick. Yes, you have that right. First Premier League hat trick, despite the fact that many would argue, myself included, that he's not quite acclimatized with the team to the point where he should would be be a shoo-in to fire in goals on a regular basis. Despite that, he still ended up getting a hat trick. So very very good for him, and it's doubly good because at one point Palace looked like they might actually be taking points of City at the Etihad, but City ended up running out 4-2 winners over there. So obviously, good result for them. And in the late kickoff, by the way, it was Arsenal who, you remember, had started the league unbeaten. In fact, not just unbeaten, they were on a winning streak, 3 straight wins. But they were up against a Fulham side that would prove to be tricky customers. Despite that, Arsenal ended up getting away with a 2-1 win. And when I say getting away, I don't mean it in a negative sense because Fulham were very good and they took the lead through Alexander Mitrovic in this second half. But Arsenal then ended up actually, showing a lot of fortitude. Martin Odegaard, their club captain, equalized for them. And after that, Gabriel Magalhaes, the centre-back, ended up scoring a late winner. So that ensures that Arsenal stay on top of the Premier League. That's not a sentence I thought I'd be saying. But they're on top of the Premier League now, and they will also, stay on top of the Premier League for at least the next game week. They have now taken 12 points of their first 4 games, and they've really actually started the season pretty well. You have to give them that credit in that regard. But of course, if we're talking about these games, these weren't the only games that took place today. There were, of course, other games as well. Brentford and Everton played out a 1-1 draw. Anthony Gordon, who's been subject to interest from Chelsea, scored the first goal for Everton, but Brentford ended up getting an equalizer courtesy of Vitaly Janelt. Now, obviously, it's a better result for Brentford than it is for Everton. Everton desperately needed a win. They didn't end up getting it, and that's not exactly the best of looks for them. And in the other match of the day, there was, of course, Brighton and Hove Albion versus a resurgent Leeds United, who had only ended up beating Chelsea 3-0 last week. Well, Leeds came crashing back to reality this time around with, of course, Brighton and Hove Albion beating them 1-0. And so, unfortunate result in that sense for Leeds, but Brighton was a much better side, and they showed the kind of solidity that Chelsea, quite frankly, didn't last week, and that's why they ended up coming away with a win. So obviously, not much in terms of changes in terms of the table, because of course I remember we're still in early days, so there's not much to reflect on in terms of the table. But of course, remember, tomorrow also there's 3 more matches to round off game week 4, so we'll be coming to you live and discussing those matches as we are right now tomorrow as well when the matches are done with. So do join us for that. And of course, don't forget, Sunday is an action-packed day of sporting action. There's India, Pakistan, there's Formula 1, there's football, there's a lot of stuff, and you can find the best coverage of all of that on Sports Day. So do join us tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me now. Don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, drop us a comment about how happy you were that your favorite team won, and of course subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and tap the bell icon so that you know when it is we're going live or uploading a new video for you guys. Also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course download the AajTak app for the latest breaking news updates from the world of football and sport in general. Thank you all so much. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for joining us. I'll be seeing you again tomorrow. So good night and thank you and bye-bye for now.